Okay, folks, we are live.
Oh, we're live. I see you now, Young.
Yeah, Tom Gray, it's great to have you here. I mean, I'm so excited. You've certainly been a big part of the last, several years. I mean, since this 1972 or something like that, when I heard your first recording. So, you know,
Yeah, the
oh, that
first
was
recording.
seldom seen, and that would be the early country gentleman.
Yeah, 72 was the first recording of the Seldom Scene.
Yeah,
We started in November of 71.
yeah, yeah. So I grew up in Sweden. So on my first trip over here, I saw seldom seen at let me see now, the Slagel's pasture.
Oh yes, that was a good venue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I remember when y'all started because of course you had never seen you live, so
Oh,
and then I remember y'all did
can I tell a story about Slagle's pasture and
yeah.
how
Let me just yeah, let me
Go
just
ahead.
yeah.
You
So
finish. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So he started with Little Georgia Rose, the a cappella, and that was extremely powerful. One of those moments that you always remember as one of those chill bump moments. That was one of them, yeah, for sure. Great. So we got Jerry Stewart here,
Yes.
longtime friend, and I got my
Hi, Jan.
hey Jerry. It's great to have you on here, and
Good to be
from
here.
down in Carl's Story country there in near Greer, South Carolina. We've got John D. Dill. What does that middle initial stand for?
David.
Yeah, that's
My daddy always wanted me to include my middle name, so I always put D when you know.
yeah, yeah. Well, Jerry and Tom, we live it's quite ways away, and Jerry in Siler City, and Tom in about the D.C. area or somewhere.
Well, hey, Jerry, you want to tell them the story about when you and I met each other?
That'd be fun. I moved to D.C. to go to college in the late 50s and arrived at college the first day and met Pete Kuykendall. Pete was taking the same electronics courses, and we became buddies and classmates and didn't know that each other had a really strong interest in bluegrass music.
Yeah. Hey,
Then
Jerry, for
I had
some
a
of our
friend
listeners,
who, oh, excuse me.
yeah, just to tell the people a little bit about Pete Kuykendall. He's an important person in our music, and I mean, just basically without
Well,
sidetracking.
Tom can add to this, but Pete was a pivotal person in bluegrass music. Period. And
Yeah.
in the D.C. area, he had grown up in near Arlington, Virginia, and knew and had played music most of his life. His mom was a piano teacher, so he could
Hmm.
read music and play by ear. And he was really connected to the bluegrass scene and the musicians in the area. So it was through him that I met most of the musicians, and then but I'd not met Tom, didn't know about Tom, and I had a friend to take me across the river, Potomac, to a record store that I had heard had a lot of bluegrass music. And I'm thumbing through the Bill Monroe stuff, or was going to thumb through it, and there was a kid there thumbing through the same stuff I was planning to look through. It was Tom. So I'll let you
Yeah.
pick it up at that point.
Yeah.
What was the name of that store, Tom?
I think it was Arlington Music.
I think so.
I think so. Of course, in Arlington, Virginia. Yeah, of course, I noticed that fellow leafing through the same records that I was interested in, and I think Jerry was the first one to say, "Oh, I like the same kind of music you do. Do you pick?" Which is a unique aspect of the bluegrass community. The people who are attracted to the music learn to play it and do play it.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
he said, "What do you play?" At the time, my main instrument was a mandolin. I said, "I play a mandolin," and Jerry said, "I play a mandolin." I said, "Well, why don't we get together and jam?" Because I had a bunch of high school friends uh, who got together in each other's homes and rehearsed and jammed. And then when I heard Jerry play, I said, "Hey, this guy's a better player than I am. I always wanted to be a bass player anyway, so I'm going to follow in the footsteps of our friend Tom Morgan. I'm going to get me a bass, and I want to be the bass player in this band." And so, Jerry, it is because of you that I became a bass player, and I got gigs.
Tom, I may remember this wrong. It's been a while, but I think you had that Tom Morgan had been to your house and had left his bass at your house.
He
And you
did.
were actually playing Tom's bass at the first session that we got together to play.
Yes.
And
There had been another group of people who rehearsed to play charity shows, and Tom was a part of that. And he left his bass in my parents' basement. See, up until that point, I used to take my guitar and thump bass runs on it. I said, "I'd like to have a real bass to try to see if I could do this on a real big old bass fiddle." Um, I'd been doing it only on the bass strings of the guitar up to that point, and then Tom left his bass in the house, and so uh, I borrowed it for a day or two, and then I went down to the local pawn shop and bought my own. I became the Rocky Ridge Ramblers bass player, and we enticed Jerry to be our senior spokesman. The rest of the band was all in high school. Jerry was already a college student.
yeah, I was the old man in the group.
yeah.
Well, man, that was you.
That was me.
Yeah. Well, that's so.
You know,
Who else?
Tom, at one time, the Rocky Ridge Ramblers were probably one of the few complete 5-piece bluegrass bands, you know, with classical instruments. I mean, the banjo, mandolin, fiddle, guitar, and bass in the DC area.
Yeah, that's right. Not all bands had all 5 of those instruments, but we did then. That would have been 1958. We were playing. Yeah.
I'm looking something up here just that I would like to play. I got so excited to have you all on here telling stories that I forgot to put together a playlist. But I
Well,
want what is the oldest existing recording of the two of you together?
That's probably
Joe Buzzard
the
Studio. He made
Joe
his
Buzzard
own.
and the one that we did for what later became Smithsonian. It was Folkway at the
Oh
time for
yes.
Mike Sager. We did Rocky Run, and you played with me for that recording. and that was about the same time frame that we did the Joe Buzzard thing.
Yes, yeah. Joe Buzzard just made his own homemade discs
Oh,
and
okay.
out a single record. You know, we recorded Down Where the River Bends,
That's right.
and
And RG chimes on the back, banjo tune that Bob Linder
yes,
came up with.
yes.
Do you
Our banjo
remember?
player was Bob Linder. Our fiddle player was Luke Roswell.
Right.
Our guitarist, lead singer was Monty Monteith. Monty passed away only about a year ago, and we lost Bob about a year before that. And
Yeah.
I don't know if Luke is still alive. He had moved to Florida 40 years ago, and I've lost touch.
Yeah. Okay.
Now here's
Yeah.
a piece of trivia. This is real trivia. The banjo tune RG chimes. Do you remember, Tom, what RG stands for?
I've felt guilty for the rest of my life after you told me what it stood for, and I spilled the beans.
But
Remember what it stands for. You want to tell us, Terry?
what was the name of the tune again? RG.
RG, like initial R and then G like George. The banjo player's favorite expression was rotten guys or rotten guy. And so I think when he came up with the tune, some of us named it RG chimes or whatever, to make use of his rotten guys. Now, is that what
Yeah.
you heard or is that different?
Yeah, that was Bob's nickname, RG.
Right.
Is there? Yeah. I should have had already put this together, but I thought maybe. Tom, are you aware of any links? Do you have a web page or something where we could find some?
No, that was just a homemade recording in a guy's basement. And he manufactured his own 78 RPM discs. Even, years after 78s had gone off the market, he had a machine to make his own discs. So he made our 78 RPM. I can go down in my record room and show you a copy of it. But he had his own homemade label that he lettered with our names on it.
Yeah.
Tom, a few years
was never.
ago.
I don't think that was ever put online. It was just something that he manufactured. It wasn't.
Tom, about, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, he did a CD set that had several CDs in it and took all of those recordings that he had originally put on tape, and then from the tape he had originally made 78s. He transferred from that tape to CD.
Oh,
so RG
that
Chimes is out there as a part of that CD set. It's one cut, and Down Where the River Bends is also on that same set. So it is out there in decent sound quality because he had a good mic. The original 78 didn't sound real good, but the CD's not bad.
Yeah. So how did I found this recording of the Little Georgia Rose. That which album was that on? Was it one? No, it was one of the.
That was on Act 1 of the Seldom Scene.
Which one?
Act 1.
Yeah, okay. And then it was on the live at the Cellar Door, I believe.
Yeah, it was on the Cellar Door live recording. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A live cut made it to the Cellar Door album. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was Duffy's idea to, instead of the usual instrumental kickoff to a tune, we would just begin the song by singing the chorus a cappella.
Yeah, it was beautiful, great. I mean, as I said, I just got chill bumps when I heard the scene do that. That was with not Starling, but Phil Rosenthal. It was good.
Of course, Rosenthal wasn't there yet.
Not when I saw you all in Virginia there. No, I mean it's Slagle's pasture.
Oh, it's Slagle's. Yes, yeah. Phil would have been there at Slagle's.
Yeah.
Right quickly, Jan sharing some pictures that I sent him.
Yeah.
That's y'all very early on. I think this photo was taken in 72, late 72.
Can you all see that?
Oh, yes, yeah. That picture is at Indian Springs Festival. We were still dressing alike, and John Duffy is holding his duck mandolin he had built.
Now, did you play there at Indian Springs? I guess it's 1973.
Yes, I'm sure we did. We played there every year. There was a festival. I think it lasted for about 6 years.
Yeah, the one where Clarence White was at 1973.
Yeah. It's hard to remember the specific what happened on what years.
Yeah.
But I do recall a very memorable event. It was John Starling's last festival. He had already announced he was leaving, and we had already hired Phil Rosenthal to replace him. And we played that last show at Indian Springs Festival. And, so many people were making over John Starling. I kind of felt sorry for Phil. He needs some attention to himself. So I knew Phil was someone who enjoyed a good jam session. So I imposed on all the other members of the Seldom scene, once the last show has been played at the festival, let's all gather in the parking lot and have a jam session with Phil as the guitar player. So we did that, and it grew and it grew. All of these pickers, can you believe John Duffy is picking in the field? And Del McCurry came and joined the jam. Missy Raines came over, breaking the rule. There's a rule that says you can only have one bass at a time in a jam session. Well, I was playing, and Missy came along, and we were both playing double bass. Anyway, oh God. So many people came up there and jammed. It got loud and chaotic. And Phil, being the shy person that he was, even though I had organized this for Phil, trying to make him feel good, he just snuck away. He didn't want to be around this mob scene going on.
Yeah.
Well, the next weekend on the WAMU radio, Gary Henderson, the announcer, gave a lecture. All of you parking lot pickers, jam session pickers, listen to me. We all need to get our jam session etiquette. They said, don't interfere if there's a jam session going on with professionals who are above your level, and use your judgment whether you could add or detract from a jam going on. Gary gave his lecture on jam session etiquette as a result of that big jam that I organized, trying to help Phil feel more welcome.
Yeah, yeah. Is Phil involved in music still? Do you keep up with him?
You say, is Phil still involved?
Yes,
Oh, yes.
in the music, yeah. That's good to hear.
Yeah, yes. Phil and his family is one of the few bluegrass groups to feature a trumpet.
Yeah,
Phil and Naomi have a no. Phil, no. Naomi is the daughter. Phil and Beth had a daughter, Naomi, and a son named Nathaniel. So Nathaniel has become a trumpeter.
well, I think that's
In Phil's recording of children's music, which he does a lot of, he often has Nathaniel, not Nathaniel, Daniel. I'm sorry, it's Daniel. Daniel. He gets Daniel to play. I'm sorry. At my age, I get some people's names wrong.
oh
I forget them. I can't remember my own.
yeah.
Yeah. Tom, could you talk just a little bit about the period at the end of the Country Gentleman up to the starting formation of the Seldom scene?
Yeah. Uh, okay. I had left the Country Gentleman in 1964. I did play with many local bands, some of which you may have heard of, some not. Benny and Valley Kane.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they played all the local bar rooms, and I also made records. I played with Bill Emerson and Cliff Waldron in their band.
Yeah, that was a good band.
New Shades of Grass.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I helped organize a band, bringing Buzz Busby out of retirement. You know, for a few years after Buzz's near-death experience that caused the formation of the Country Gentleman, Buzz didn't play for a while. But he said, I need to get back in and I need to start from scratch and do this again. So we got a several night a week gig at Ruby's Bar in Lorton, Virginia. It was Leon Morris, Buzz Busby, Dick Drevo, and myself.
I missed a couple of those names. Can you just repeat?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, well, can you repeat those names, please?
Oh, yeah, the names of the people. And we called that band the Bluegrass Association. Leon later altered that and called it the Associates. Anyway, the Bluegrass Association was Buzz Busby, Leon Morris,
Yeah.
Dick Drevo,
Oh,
Drevo, who was known as a recording engineer as well as a banjo player. He played banjo in the Bluegrass Association, and I played bass in that band.
So I recognize several of these names for people who've been in one way or another associated with Scottish Stoneman. Do you? What do you remember most of Scottish Stoneman? You have.
He was just such an intense player. You just had to listen to him. His incredible tone and fancy choice of notes was incredible.
Mm-hmm. So I know he recorded with Emerson, Bill Emerson.
Yes.
And then he recorded what band was that on? That
Okay. When I joined Emerson and Waldron,
this would have been earlier, you know.
that would have been 1969.
Yeah.
At first, they called their band the Lee Highway Boys. And Bill really decided that really did not sound very respectable. So it became the New Shades of Grass once we got Mike Aldridge to join the band. Now, Mike had been a player who did not play professionally for several years, although he certainly was good enough to do so.
Yes.
Now, Jerry, you and I jammed with Mike when Mike was still a banjo player.
Yes, Mike told me a few years back that he said he actually wanted to join our band. This was before Mike was in a band, and he said the problem was I was a banjo player and not really a wonderful banjo player. But he said I went to a show that the Rocky Ridge Ramblers played, and Tom had sort of put out word that they were looking for a banjo player, and he said I went to listen, and he said the fill-in banjo player that was applying for the job was better than I was, and so I never mentioned that I wanted to be in the band. So at least he didn't mention it to me. Were you aware that he was thinking about being a member of the Rocky Ridge Ramblers as a banjo player?
I did not know. I know that we had jammed, and I remember going to his parents' home in Kensington, meeting Mike and Dave, and Mike was a player. But the interesting historical significance of this was mid-1950s, and Flatt & Scruggs had just recently hired Buck Graves, or Uncle Josh, to play the dobro. This was the first time there had been a dobro in a bluegrass band. Mike was so excited about that. He wanted to play a dobro himself, but he didn't yet have one. And, you know, it was in Mike's family. Mike's uncle, his mom's brother, was Ellsworth Cousins, who played slide guitar with Jimmy Rogers in 1929, recorded with Jimmy Rogers, and wrote some songs that were recorded, and you still hear them played sometimes. Ellsworth was playing a slide guitar back in 1929. It would have been the dobro was just being invented. Ellsworth's slide guitar was just an acoustic guitar with a high knot, and he would play it with a bar like you would a steel guitar, or in those days they called it Hawaiian guitar. Once they made dobros, and Ellsworth got a dobro, and Mike said he played it at their family gatherings. And he actually was a member of a band that played around Washington, D.C. In the 1930s. They were called the Blue-Gray Troubadours. So I thought that was very interesting. Jimmy Rogers, when he was wanting to record, wanted to get Ellsworth and wanted to get members of his band and play some shows together. Ellsworth appeared on Rogers' recordings, including the historic combination of jazz and hillbillies when Louis Armstrong was on a country recording with Ellsworth playing the slide guitar and Jimmy Rogers singing California Blues. Look up on YouTube the Jimmy Rogers recording, which I think was 1929. California Blues, which at the time was Blue Yodel number 4. It had the trumpet by Louis Armstrong and piano by Lil Hardin, who was married to Louis Armstrong.
Wow.
So it was very significant that they're in the studio together. You had hillbillies and jazz players. You had white people and black people together in the 1920s.
Here is this. Let's just listen briefly to this. That's just exactly what you were talking about.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
You hear the horn and the slide guitar together.
Yeah. Well, you know, speaking of the Hawaiian music, you know, Richard Green and Peter Rowan was on here a few weeks ago, and they had found a found a Hawaiian song with a mandolin, and I guess the regular instrumentation that's really exactly the same melody as Kentucky Waltz, you know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Is this on a recording of Peter's?
This is and you know the mandolin, the tremolo, and everything. It's very interesting. I'll see if I can find it. I'll play this.
You know, among the many. I'm sorry.
Now go ahead, please. Fill the air with some wisdom.
Speaking of Peter Rowan and Hawaiian music, you're talking to me. Members of the Seldom Scene were in the recording studio with Peter Rowan for a couple of his albums in the 1970s or 80s, and he was singing some Hawaiian songs.
Yeah.
He had a very pretty song called Maui Mama.
Yeah, okay.
Mike Aldrich played the dobro, I believe, and I can't remember everything that was on the recording, but it was Hawaiian, it was Rowan, and members of the Seldom Scene.
Yeah.
I went to the studio directly after my day job. I used to be a cartographer, a map maker at National Geographic. We had just published a new big wall map of the United States. So I took that rolled up wall map, spread it out on the floor, and Peter was so amazed. He said, "I love maps. Let me peruse this." And he could tell stories about all the places he had been, which of course there were very many. So he got excited about the geography of maps and music.
Yeah. Well, I love maps. I can look at a map forever. And now with this, like Google Earth, it's easy to get lost. But speaking of getting lost, every time you mention a song title, I think, I need to find that. And then you mention another, and then I get sidetracked because I get pretty excited when you mention these tunes, you know. So
yeah,
you said, yeah. I'm gonna try to find that Monroe thing or the Hawaiian thing there, and then Jerry, you can tell some stories.
Okay.
Or Tom. So tell us about John Duffy. How did y'all meet? You grew up together?
We didn't grow up together. John grew up in Bethesda. I grew up in Northwest Washington, D.C., just across the border from each other. I first met John Duffy when his band and my band, which was, it might have been the one with Jerry with the Rocky Ridge Ramblers. We played a live radio show with several live bands, and John played with a band called Lucky Chatman and his Ozark Mountain Boys. John Duffy played mandolin, and just seeing the air of that big guy, he looked so self-important and arrogant. He did not look like the kind of person you wanted to try to get along with. I'm sorry. I love John Duffy as a friend, but he came across as a cold person. And honestly, he seemed a bit arrogant when we were at that radio station and took turns. His band played and our band played.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
I don't remember that, so maybe I was not part of that particular thing, but
might have not been.
I do remember the first time I met John Duffy. Pete Kuykendall took me to a country gentleman show, and he was filling in on bass, and I sat, in the audience, and they finished the first set, and Pete picks up Duffy's mandolin and brings it over to the table where I'm seated, and hands me the mandolin, and Bill Emerson comes over and sits down. John Duffy doesn't come over, and Charlie Walter doesn't come over. They're off on the other side of the bar, and Pete says, play so and so, Bill Monroe instrumental or kickoff or turnaround or something. So I'm playing John Duffy's mandolin and thinking, as arrogant as that man appeared to be when he was up on stage playing, I'm certainly not going to become a friend by sitting in his club playing his mandolin during intermission time.
Yeah.
And we spent 15 or 20 minutes doing that, and Emerson calls out John and says, come over here. John comes over, and Bill says, do such and such again. And I did it. And he says to John, now that's how it goes. And if you'd stick to it in practice, instead of just taking the first thing you come up with, you could play it like that too. And I thought, all chance of ever being a friend with John just went out the window. But it turned out to be that it was not a problem. John was not as hardcore as he appeared to be. He always more or less treated me as an equal. As a matter of fact, he came shortly after that to the boarding house where I roomed when I was in college on a Saturday afternoon, and we played, just the two of us played for a couple hours, just swapping kids back and forth, So it was obviously not a problem, but I thought, just sitting there playing, I thought, I'll never have a chance to be a friend with this man. This is entirely the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, but it's human nature too, I think.
Well, your fingers made him a friend and an admirer.
Yeah.
Well, yes. He liked the same stuff I liked. We.
No.
I don't know. It sounds or looks like he underwent some kind of change in his attitude about the mandolin playing, and he really played better back in the early days. I thought he got to a point where he didn't seem to just care.
Duffy was a Bill Monroe disciple as far as learning the mandolin. This is my opinion. And then he branched off, and when he was in bands that were out in front of folks, he realized that he couldn't make a living selling somebody else's stuff. He needed to sell his own stuff. So he found ways to play that was unique for him, which I admire him for doing. Whether you like what he did that was different or not is, that's personal. But I admired him for doing it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, John Duffy scared a lot of people, but he was a warm-hearted friend to those who knew him well.
I know Tony Rice loved that guy.
I'm sorry?
Tony Rice, he loved John Duffy.
Well, good. I wished I could have spoken with Tony in his last years, but I was afraid to try to make a connection. I'd read that he'd become rather reclusive and was afraid to try to. But we certainly knew each other well back in the 70s and 80s when we were playing a lot of the same shows together, whether he was with Crow or in his Tony Rice unit group. You know, what we saw each other frequently. And honestly, it was a high point in my career to have played with one of Tony's albums, the California Autumn album.
It's a wonderful album.
Tony made the most beautiful arrangement I've ever heard of Georgia on My Mind.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just solo guitar.
The chords that he chose to play is just not ordinary.
His arrangement of that song leaned a lot towards Jerry Reed's chord progression. You know, he loved Jerry Reed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jerry had recorded that song, you know, years before that.
Good point. Good point. So, Tom, did you play on Mike Aldridge's first solo album, Blues and Blue?
Yes, I was one of 5 bass players who appeared on that album.
I remember the name list of names. We went on and on.
Yeah, there were several bassists, some playing acoustic, some playing electric.
Like Lowell George.
Listening to that album, I decided I need to get a better bass fiddle. The best sounding bass out of all 5 of them on that album was Ed Ferris's bass. He had a carved bass, which it's like the one I have now, Mizell brand. Ed later got another carved bass, which was Pullman. But Ed's bass sounded so much richer and fuller than either of the electrics or the uprights on Mike's first album. So I just decided I need to get me a carved wood bass.
Yeah.
So I did. I've been playing the same one now since 1973.
Did Ed Ferris take over immediately after you left the Country Gentleman?
Yes. Ed Ferris took over for me. At first, John Duffy didn't want him. I had called Ed up to fill in during the night when we were playing the Shamrock. And Ed was just learning to play. And Duffy told me, don't ask that guy up anymore. But then within a year, you know, Ed was getting better and I knew I was going to have to leave. And so I said, I would recommend you hire Ed Ferris. He's gotten much better than what you remember from those nights when he sat in.
Yeah.
So it's true. I mean, Ed sat in, he played with taste and tone and just the way you pull those strings. That's what's important. And I try to practice that as well.
Yeah.
So Ed was good at that. So a lot of other bands called on Ed to play on their recordings.
Yeah.
So
He played with Bill Bill Harrell.
yes.
Oh.
Oh, hey, I can tell you a Bill Harrell story having to do with gentlemen.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Okay, 1960. This was, it would have been like late summer of 1960. Bill Harrell asked me to join his band. And I said, yes, yeah, I'll be glad to. And I remember playing one engagement in a big dance hall.
Yeah.
Carl Nelson was playing fiddle and piano.
Wonderful fiddle player.
He was good at both of them. Anyway, and shortly after that, I got the call from John Duffy that Jim Cox was going to be bowing out of the Country Gentlemen, and would I like to take his place? And of course, I said yes. So I went back to Bill Harrell. I said, Bill, I'm going to have to leave your band. I've been offered a job with the Country Gentlemen. And Harrell said, you're making the right choice.
Yeah. An honorable man.
Yes, he was an honorable man.
How many people would, most people would be very upset. I mean, it's hard to, to just, for some people.
Okay.
Tom, let me jog your memory.
Okay, Jerry.
The Rocky Ridge Ramblers, the band, when you were a teenager, went to Berryville, Virginia to a so-called professional band competition.
Yes.
We learned about it from Benny and Valley Kane through Pete Kuykendall, who was playing banjo with them at the time. The Country Gentlemen were there, and we competed against Benny and Valley Kane, the Country Gentlemen, and 2 or 3 country groups that had electric guitars and that sort of thing. Do you remember that?
I remember it very well.
It was the first time I went to Berryville, and I probably misspoke when I said it was earlier that when Pete took me to meet the Country Gentleman, that was the first time I saw Duffy, because Duffy was there that day. With the Country Gentleman, and it was probably Cox playing bass with him at that time.
I think that the result of that contest, we came in third, the Country Gentlemen came in second, and Benny and Valley won first place.
I remembered that we finished third. I didn't remember who finished, ahead of us, but
the audience voted.
That's right. That was unique. Explain how that worked to the crowd, to the folks listening. Do you remember
all those who attended the show, the contest, had their ticket stubs, and at the end of the contest, they invited all the audience members to take their ticket stubs and put it in the cigar box in front of a representative of their favorite band in the contest.
That's right.
And so, Jerry, we appointed you to be our representative on stage.
That's right. So I'm standing there beside a Duffy, who was the representative for the Country Gentleman, if I remember right.
Yes.
And watching people come up, and every time they dropped a ticket in our cigar box and didn't drop it in the Country Gentleman's box, can you imagine how that made me feel, to think that somebody out there thought we were better than those other bands that had competed? It was, in order to finish third, there had to be some that thought we were the best.
There had to
just
be.
the way the voting was done. So it was. Anyway.
With
That was.
the audience voting like that, it really became a popularity contest of who had the most friends there.
That's right.
Benny and Valley were well known, had lots of friends in the area, and they voted for them. Country
Right.
Gentlemen, certainly being the better, more polished, professional sounding group of everyone there, did not have as many friends as Benny and Valley Kane. And we had enough friends to come in third. And I remember we took our winnings and went out and treated ourselves to dinner that night.
There was another incident that happened that day. We had bought shirts. One of the girls had engraved RRR on the pocket of each shirt, and we had bought white knit ties, like string ties, to wear as a costume.
And what happened to your tie, Gary?
We're on the way down there, and I discover that I have forgotten to bring my tie. You remember this? You were in the back seat. You were in the back seat with a girlfriend, and there was the whole band was in a car. The bass was inside the car, and at least two of the band members had girlfriends with them. So it was crowded. The back seat was crowded, and we were talking about what we could do. It was a Sunday afternoon, as I remember. The show was. We're on our way from D.C. to Berryville, Virginia, and all of a sudden there's giggling from under the bass fiddle. And one of the girls says, "I know what I could make one out of, but you wouldn't wear it." And I thought a little bit, and I thought, she's talking about Kotex. She's talking about the outer layer of Kotex. And so I said, "I will buy it. I will pay for it, but I will not go in the store and buy it. But I will wear the tie if it looks like a match. If it looks like the other ties, I'll wear it." Those girls, using pins from their hair, fashioned a tie that looked remarkably like the others from the, if you were in the audience when we were on stage. So while we're playing, John Duffy comes over. Do you remember those trees that grew at an angle up from when you're standing on stage?
Yeah.
He came over there to the base of those trees about 20 feet from the stage. And I'm trying to introduce the band or introduce the next song or something. And Duffy yells, "Just tell us about your tie." Pete Kuykendall and Benny and Valley Kane was supposed to have kept it quiet, but they had blabbed to everybody what my tie was made out of. So.
Yeah, Valley Kane got a big laugh out of that too.
At the end of that day, I took the tie and clipped it on a lampshade in the boarding house where I was, staying, and told the story of the tie to the lady that ran the boarding house. And after I got out of college and married Fran, and this was probably in the early 60s, I went back up that way, and we went by the boarding house. And the lady takes Fran in there and still clipped to the lampshade is that tie. And she tells the story of the tie and the origin and that sort of thing. So the tie lived on. I didn't wind up owning it. It stayed at her house when I left.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, that belongs in the Bluegrass Museum.
I'm sure it's gone. She's been dead for a long time. So.
Yes.
Hey, Tom, before it gets too late here and we have to get off.
Yes, John.
Me being a big Seldom Seen fan, could you please talk about how the formation of Seldom Seen come about?
Yes. The Seldom Seen began as a weekly jam session at Ben Eldridge's house. Uh, just down the street from Ben's house was John Starling's house. They had been friends ever since they had gone to the University of Virginia together. And they both got jobs in the DC area and wound up buying houses in the same block in Bethesda. So Ben hosted jam sessions. Those jam sessions always included Mike Aldridge and Dave Aldridge, a fiddle player named Dan Hopala, who doesn't play anymore. And they had a series of bass players who would come play, including me. I would go to some of those jams. Lynn Holsclaw would go to some. Gary Henderson would go to some. So we were a rotating cast of bass players. But this was the first time people really got a chance to hear John Starling sing.
Yeah.
Lynn Holsclaw was the manager of the Country Gentlemen, a good friend of John Duffy's. And when Lynn heard John Starling singing, he thought, this just might be what the world has been waiting for, something to get John Duffy to come out of retirement and play music again. See, John had quit the Country Gentlemen a year and a half earlier, and many bands were trying to get him to join their bands, including Flatt and Scruggs. Louise Scruggs was making phone calls to John Duffy to try to get him to join. And John always felt it would be an honor, but it really would not work out well. Anyway, Lynn invited John Duffy to come over to one of Ben's jam sessions. And as Lynn Holsclaw had predicted, once John Starling and John Duffy sang together and heard their voices together, there was a magic there.
Oh, yeah.
And so John Duffy allowed us how he would be willing to get back into the business. So the band became the Seldom Scene. Ben's basement band had filled in one night at the Red Fox when Cliff Waldron's band couldn't make it. This was after Ben and Mike had quit Cliff's band, but the owner of the Red Fox said, I need a band to fill in when Cliff's going out of town. So could you bring your basement jammers over here to play? This was before John Duffy got involved. Okay. But we played there at the Red Fox. The personnel was John Starling, Ben Eldridge, Mike Aldridge, Dave Aldridge, myself on bass, and Barry, no, I'm sorry, Barnes, what's his name? I'm sorry. Somebody, his name, people's names forget, I'll get them. Somebody Barnes played mandolin. Anyway, the owner of the Red Fox liked what we did and recommended to the owner of another club known as the Rabbit's Foot that if they ever decide they want to have a bluegrass night, they should get Ben's jam band.
Yeah.
So that's what became the Seldom Scene's first gig. This other club was a place called the Rabbit's Foot. And so by that time, John Duffy had gone to some of Ben's jams and decided to become a part of the band. And Mike Aldridge gave me a call. He said, we're going to become a professional band now. John Duffy's going to be in it. And since Len Holtzclaw was the bass player when we had the jams and he introduced Duffy and Starling, we owe it to him to let him be the bass player. But he probably won't be able to take it because he is a detective in the Arlington police force. So if Len has to turn it down, would you be willing to take the job? This was Mike's question to me. And of course I said, yes, yes, yes. And as we expected, Len could not take the gig and he was happy to let me do it. So then when we started the Seldom Scene, we were actually a 6-piece band. We had begun with both of the Aldridge brothers when Dave Aldridge was the tenor singer. Well, once he was in a band with John Duffy, Dave began to feel less and less necessary. So within 2 weeks, Dave dropped out. Okay. And so the 5-piece band that you know as the Seldom Scene came together then that November of 1971. So that's how it started.
Wow. Thank you so much for that.
It's all because of Ben's weekly jam sessions.
Yeah. When Duffy left the Gentleman, didn't he start a Luther shop where he was repairing instruments?
He was already working at the music store repairing instruments.
Okay.
So he was content to do that only. John Duffy got very disillusioned with the music business, which led him to quit the Gentleman. What really disappointed John was when they had a hit on their hands. Bringin' Mary Home was a really popular song in the 60s.
Yeah.
And they were asked to appear on one of the late night talk shows, the Johnny Carson show. And not only would they be expected to play without payment, they would have to pay their own money to the producers of the show for allowing them to be seen on TV.
Wow.
John said, I'm too professional. I'm too good to put up with this. I'm not going to pay you to provide my art. And he was just very disappointed and soon dropped out.
Yeah.
There was an interesting night at the Shamrock, which was John Duffy's last night with the Gentleman. Everyone knew it would be Duffy's last night, so the joint was crowded, and the Gentleman had decided to hire Herschel Sizemore to be the new mandolin player, tenor singer.
Oh.
Herschel had just moved up from Alabama to take on that job.
With the Shenandoah cut-ups, I guess.
Well, that came soon after.
Okay.
At least I thought it came after. Herschel was in the club that night, and as I looked over and saw him, his eyes were getting big and he was scared. How can I replace this guy who is such a powerhouse singer and picker and MC of the show, and everyone in here loves him so much?
Yeah.
How can I take his place? Herschel backed out of it, did not take the job. So with just a few days before their next gig, they had to get someone new. and connections were made to bring Jimmy Goodrow in, and so Jimmy did take the job and stayed there for a few years, and then he came, and I think Jimmy had 3 different eras when he was a country gentleman.
Oh.
Yeah.
But he really was the replacement for John Duffy, although it was first scheduled to be Herschel. Now, we all know that Herschel played with Shenandoah Cut-Ups, and I don't know if that started after Herschel backed out of the gentleman gig or if he had already started playing with them. I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be a good question for Herschel is out in the festival circuit telling stories just like you and I are doing right now.
Yeah.
And he could tell stories, and in a way, I hate to say this about Herschel because he is such a respected person himself, but he really did seem intimidated that night watching John Duffy on his last night.
Yeah, but Duffy was pretty sort of iconic in a way. He certainly, I mean, maybe iconic is not but he had some kind of charisma or some kind of energy about him that made him imposing or intimidating.
Duffy was not a great technician as far as playing notes clean and well selected. He was a showman.
Yeah.
He would tell Jimmy Goodrow, "You're a much better player than I am, but you ain't selling it."
Mm.
Duffy would stand up there and flap his fingers in the breeze and jump around and make it look like he's doing something great. And when you listen to him, it sounded sloppy.
Yeah.
I mean, bless his heart. I love John Duffy, but really his playing sometimes did sound sloppy when you compare it to someone who plays so cleanly as Jimmy Goodrow, and like Jerry Stewart, who plays so.
Absolutely, yes.
But Duffy could sell it as an entertainer, not as a instrumental technician.
Yeah. Yeah, because Herschel's tenor singing is great, and his mandolin is just legendary.
Yes. And after that incident on Duffy's last night, Duffy had a warm spot in his heart for Herschel Sizemore, befriended him every time they would meet at the same festival, which of course happened very frequently, and the two became good friends.
Yeah.
Tom, I know how Herschel probably would have felt. John called me one time while he was with the gentleman, and he was going to be out of town for a show. And he asked me if I would fill in for him. So I went and I played. And it was just Charlie and Bill Emerson.
Oh.
Myself, and I think maybe Pete played bass that night. It was
who sang?
It was before you were involved with it.
Who sang tenor?
Bill Emerson was the tenor singer that night.
I'm
became the baritone singer. Bill let me have the baritone part. He took the tenor.
All right.
That's how it went.
I've heard sing.
So I know how short. I felt like measuring up to the crowd. It's Duffy's crowd, Duffy's place. Everybody's there to see Duffy. So, but they didn't boo me off of the stage. They were kind to me, but I do know that feeling. I did get a chance to do that one time.
Yeah.
Well, I've gotten booed off the stage twice at least. We can tell the story.
Bill Emerson was a fine tenor singer when he was young.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
He sounded a bit like Ralph Stanley.
Yeah, he's really good. I remember
He had that airy tone in his voice, kind of like Ralph's.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to get Bill Emerson on here.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Tom, quick question. I know Duffy played some dobro,
Yes.
and he also played guitar, right?
Right.
How much guitar did he play on them Scene albums?
There were several tunes where Duffy played lead guitar. You can hear the ones that feature Duffy because it was always kind of like Travis picking.
Yeah.
With that stride, with the bass notes on the downbeat and the lead notes up high. When Ben played lead guitar, it was more like an even roll, like a banjo roll.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, when I listen back to some of them with a lead guitar on a seldom seen record, to me, it's easy to tell which is Ben and which is John.
Yeah.
And Ben would play that, wasn't it like a dobro banjo deal that he played on some of that stuff?
Oh, you're talking about a muted banjo?
Yeah, like I was trying to give you an example. One of the tunes.
Alan Shelton used to play one. Is it one of those?
Yeah. Well, Alan Shelton had his 5-string dobro.
Yeah, 5-string.
But Ben Eldridge would put a mute on his banjo, and it would.
Oh yeah.
Simulate like a dobro.
Yeah.
I love that stuff.
I can't think of the name of tunes right off the top of my head, but there were many very almost iconic guitar intros that Ben played. And sometimes when John Starling wanted to sing another laid back, slow song, Ben would kind of gripe a bit and say another guitar solo tune. He'd rather be playing bluegrass banjo.
Yeah. Ben's banjo always, I'm a big fan of his. He had a style that was all his own.
Very melodic. Yeah.
I listen to that stuff like on Old Train, just the type banjo he does on that.
Yes.
It's astonishing. It really is.
Okay, and especially John, since you represent Tony Rice now, on Tony Rice's California Autumn album, Ben played his banjo intro to "You Don't Know My Mind."
Yeah.
Would blow you away to hear it coming across as very powerful bluegrass banjo, but with the selection of notes, it can be none other than Ben Eldridge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let me find it. I'm going to try to. Yeah, here.
There's Ben.
Yeah.
Honey, you don't know my mind. I'm lonesome all the time. Gonna lose a drifter, that's me. You can tell her for so long, she'll make a man's heart go wrong. Baby, you don't know my mind today. Crazy covering, slept in every old dirty jail. Oh, life's too short for you to worry me. When I find I can't win, I'm checking out again. don't know my mind today. Been a hobo and a tramp, and soul's done been stamped. For things I know my blood in a hard, hard way. I ain't here to judge and plead, just to give my poor heart ease. Maybe you don't know my mind today. Honey, you don't know my mind. I'm lonesome all the time. On to lose the drifter, that's me. They say I'm sweet and kind, but I can love you 1,000 times. Maybe you don't know my mind today.
That's, yep. Ben was strutting his stuff.
Yeah. Man, that's some good stuff right there.
You know, on all of those seldom seen live shows, Ben or John would have to decide whose turn is it to bring the second guitar, because they both would sometimes play the lead guitar. And often it would be my assignment to deliver that guitar. If we were playing someplace that was far enough away from home that Ben and John and Mike wanted to fly there, but if it was within a day's drive, I would much rather drive all the way and bring my good bass and my equipment. So on many of those trips, it was my job to bring the guitar. Now, I see a comment from Tom Mendenhall. Okay. Anyway, one day John Duffy got very angry with me because it was his turn to bring the guitar, and I brought the guitar. We finished playing at the Festival of the Bluegrass, Lexington, Kentucky, and I grabbed John's guitar case, which I assumed had his guitar in it. Went out to my car and started the long drive home, leaving John Duffy with his guitar and no case, flying home. He was not happy with me, but he was a good friend.
Yeah.
I think Tim Mendenhall here is asking for you to talk about some of the tunes Jerry and Tom wrote together that were Country Gentlemen and other songs.
Yes. Well, there were two of them. There was Silence or Tears, and there was You Left Me Alone. It's funny, Silence or Tears came together in a backwards way. I wanted to find a song that you could play fast like bluegrass, but sing it slow and let the voices ring out in harmony. And we started just humming or and going in harmony. And Jerry came in the next day and said, "Hey, I got some words for your song." And he found that 400-year-old poem by Lord Byron, and the words fit that song that we had been humming with no words.
Wow. Here it is.
When we took part in silence and tears, and broken heart to 7 more years. The love we had shared no longer could be, for now you don't care and you're setting me free. If I should meet you after all years, how should I reach you if silence are you? The dew of the morning brings to my brow. It felt like a warning of what I feel now. Your bells are all broken, my heart feels pain. I hear your name spoken and I share in its shame. If I should meet you after long years, how should I reach you if silence are true? In secret we met, in silence I grieve. Your heart should forget and your spirit deceive. They know that I knew you, I know you too well. Long should I miss you too deeply to tell. If I should meet you after long years, how should I reach you with silence or you? If I should meet you after long years, how should I reach you with silence or you?
I have to add a name in there. We listened to Silence or Tears. The dobro player on that Country Gentleman recording was Kenny Haddock.
I've always wondered that. Thank you.
On some of those tunes back in the day, John Duffy played the dobro himself.
You're right.
Yeah, but I believe that was Kenny because you can hear the mandolin and the dobro at the same time. So he was not picking one up and
right
put the other down, which he did on a few occasions.
Who was Kenny Haddock? I never heard of him.
He was from Columbus, Ohio. He came to Washington about the same time as Red Allen. And so, you know, Kenny and Red came about the same time. We asked Kenny to join the Gentlemen, and he played for about a year, maybe a year and a half.
Okay. Recorded, obviously. So this is from November 6, 1961, supposedly.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Kenny was with us when we played our appearance at Carnegie Hall in '61.
So you played there before Flatt and Scruggs?
Yes. We weren't the first bluegrass band.
Earl Taylor had played there before.
Yes. Earl Taylor was first. We were second. We played at a folk music hootenanny. That's the word.
Okay, yeah.
Sing Out magazine sponsored a concert at Carnegie Hall, and we were the bluegrass band. And hey, it's always fun to be the only bluegrass band at a folk music concert because we sound so powerful compared to all the rest of those guitar stuff.
I've experienced the opposite, you know, where you're the only bluegrass band and you're last band of a weekend-long blues festival. You can imagine people just, compared to those bands, you can't be heard at all. So that's anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so with Red Allen, did you play much or know him pretty good?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What?
Red Allen. Can you tell us something about Red?
Yes, I played a few gigs with Red Allen, but was never a member of his band. You know, when he was in DC area, he had his band, the Kentuckians, which included Tom Morgan playing bass, Pete Kuykendall on banjo, and of course Frank Wakefield
Yeah.
on mandolin. They were pretty much hanging out and doing instrument work at Tom Morgan's house. Now, Tom Morgan, during all of that time period, was a member of the U.S. Air Force. He had his assignment at a desk job in the Pentagon.
Oh, really?
So he worked there for several years, and once his enlistment was over, Tom moved back home to Morgan Springs, Tennessee, where he still lives.
Okay. Well, here is some reference to Kenny Haddock. Kenny worked for a brief time in early 1963 with Flat and Scruggs.
Oh, no, that's interesting. You know, I was not aware that he had replaced Josh.
Yeah, it was very short lived from. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to.
Okay.
Yes, I want to ask you. You had mentioned earlier about seeing Chubby Wise and Scotty Stone play.
Yes.
There must have been an interesting encounter.
It
Stylistically,
sounded like it should have been an interesting encounter, but the two of them had so much respect for each other. They both held back and would not show off. That was my humble opinion of what happened that night.
Do you remember if they played any harmonies or?
I'm sure they did. I don't know what the songs were. Like I said, it was a Patsy Stoneman gig.
Patsy Stoneman, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I did not know Patsy as well as I knew the other members of the family. Like Jerry and I used to go to see the Bluegrass Champs, which included Van Stoneman and Donna Stoneman and Jim Stoneman, and they often had Porter Church on banjo.
Okay.
Although, you know, during many time periods, Ronnie Stoneman played banjo, but most of the times that we saw them, I can picture Porter Church.
Yeah.
The only non-Stoneman in that band.
Right. And he lives somewhere in Northern Virginia, I believe.
Is he still alive?
Well, no, he used to. I mean, I his son a few times, you know, Kevin.
You know, I frequently see his son, Kevin Church, who is an incredible banjo player. Kevin has the smoothest, fastest right hand. Can blow you away.
Yeah. I remember him playing in The Country Gentleman with like Norman Wright.
Yes.
Probably back in the pretty early 90s, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, he did.
Now, I know I just had a few notes here, and I know I'm not sticking to any kind of chronology, but I know, like y'all did, like the Country Gentleman did, like a some reunion performances, as well as that record y'all recorded in the early '90s.
Yes.
Was that pretty well received idea? Was everybody in favor of that?
We were very frequently asked to do reunion concerts.
Yeah.
And they used to advertise us as the original Country Gentlemen, which we really weren't. Eddie was not original. I was not original.
Yeah.
So my late wife, Sally Gray, made up the term classic country gentleman. So that term has been used for that era of the gentleman, and enough people like that term enough that they now use another version of that name. They say the second classic country gentleman was that configuration with Doyle Lawson and Bill Emerson and Bill Yates.
Mm-hmm.
That group that did a lot of creative music.
Yeah, that one album they did in particular, the award-winning.
Yeah,
And Bill Emerson was an original member, right?
Yes, he was.
Yeah,
Bill Emerson started the Gentlemen.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic. He was one of the original members, and then he was a member during the Doyle Lawson days.
Yeah.
Yes.
Early 70s.
Bill came back during the Lawson period.
Then he left to do the Navy band thing.
Yes, yes. And at that time, when they enlisted Bill in the Navy, they tried to enlist Doyle Lawson. And I think Doyle considered it, but he wisely chose to go off and lead his own band on the outside.
Yeah.
So I think both of them have done well with their choices.
He just announced he's going to retire after next year.
Wow. These young people are falling by the wayside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Young people, okay, because Doyle is a few years younger than me, so I can call him that.
Yeah. He was born in 1944, I believe.
Okay. I was born in 41.
Okay. Well, just
I'm still the old man in the group.
You're the old man, Jerry, but you're healthy and strong and still playing good.
He's really playing good. So, well, I was gonna. What if you would pick a couple of songs that you've done with the Country Gentlemen or Seldom Seen, or maybe both? What would they be? Anything that really comes to mind?
I mean, are you asking for songs or events?
Yeah,
I didn't get the whole question. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Jerry, why don't you repeat my question? I'm a little bit. I had my second COVID shot today, so I'm gonna. I don't want to talk so much. Would you go ahead and
I think you're asking out of everything that he recorded with the Gentlemen and the Seldom Seen, if there are a couple of songs that are special to him that stand out.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. Oh yes. Okay. Special standout songs. Yes. Some
I'll find
some that I really felt good about from the Gentleman days. The Young Fisherwoman, which was oh gosh, we put that on our which album, and our jazzy instrumentals that Eddie and I still play when we get together, Sunrise and Heartaches.
Yeah.
We were trying to stretch the boundaries of bluegrass, even though, Earl Scruggs had done it before. He had played Farewell Blues, which was a jazz standard.
Right.
But we picked up on Sunrise and Heartaches. I think we did Heartaches correctly. Sunrise was fashioned after The World Is Waiting for the Sunrise, but we didn't play it correctly.
Okay.
I think it was a Les Paul composition.
Yeah.
And it included diminished chords. And us hillbillies had never learned what is a diminished chord. Since then I have learned it, and I've learned how to use them, and we do use them on occasion. But when we played Sunrise, we play it in the key of C. The first chord change should go to a C diminished, but we went to an A minor. And it sounds fine. It sounds fine. No one's going to miss that.
Yeah. I mean, it's ingrained to everybody's mind, who's followed Country Gentleman.
Yeah. So we always went to the A minor, and that's what, Eddie and I still play it same way together like we did 50 years ago.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Here is a sample from says John Duffy and Charlie Waller and the Country Gentleman. I don't know if that is you.
Okay.
Carnegie Hall, or did you record it in the studio on Sunrise? No, I mean on Starday.
Even though the album was titled Bluegrass at Carnegie Hall, it was a studio album.
Okay, yeah, I seem to remember something like that.
The live tapes from Carnegie Hall are on the Smithsonian Folkways album called Country Gentleman on the Road and More.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So that's a distinction there. But I think, we did a studio recording of Sunrise.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to a little bit of it.
Yeah. Where's that bass break?
I can hear it. There is that one lick that bending those strings, the double strings like Chuck Berry or
Yeah.
Monroe. Where so I read it somewhere where Chuck Berry used to listen to Monroe's music, and you can hear it like if you like Johnny B. Good or something. That's just classic gospel type. Those turnarounds and
Me and old bluegrass banjo buddy of mine used to play what I think was a version of that, and he called it "Waiting on the Sunrise."
Yeah, you could do that. I think originally it was "The World is Waiting on the Sunrise." We just called it "Sunrise," perhaps so Duffy could put his name on it and get a few more pennies in royalties.
Yeah. Well, I've had an interesting experience. I played this tune a couple of times in jam in Japan back in the 70s. So
Whoa!
it's a tune that's pretty well known.
It sure is, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Now I know there are several players in Japan who modeled themselves after the early gentlemen. Our dear friend Akira Otsuka, who's moved to the States here, and I still see him frequently. He was part of the Bluegrass 45 who played in Japan and came and toured the States as well.
Yeah. He's got one of the duck mandolins.
Yeah.
that's right. So how many of those did John Duffy make? Did you ever keep track of that?
They were two, I think.
Okay.
I think Duffy only made two. Someone in Japan made a copy of the duck mandolin, and I don't know if there were more than one of those copies made, but I think Duffy himself only made two, one of which he played and one of which he gave or sold to Akira.
Yeah.
Both of them sounded great and recorded well, but both of them wound up having physical problems in that the neck would warp. So the duck mandolins did not last very long.
Now, he had old Gibson that got stole.
Yes.
And he used Duck 1, I think, on, was it Act 1?
Yes. When we first started the Seldom scene, he played a borrowed mandolin, which he borrowed from Dave Blood. And then he made his own duck mandolin, which he played for a year or more. Then he finally was able to get his hands again on the old F12 mandolin that he had altered to look like an F5. He got his hands on that again, and that's what he played for the rest of his life.
Well, I gave it away. I was going to kind of fade into this, but I know it's an interruption here, but it's this really moved me a lot when I first heard it, both on the recording, but later live at Slagle's Pasture in Tennessee in 1981.
Way down in the Blue Ridge Mountains, way down where the coal mines roll, lives my sweetheart of the mountains. She's my little Georgia Rose. The story that is true, my little rose, blue Georgia, with the hair of color, heart true. Way down in the bridge mountain, way down where the covers grow, lives my sweetheart of the mountains. She's my little Georgia rose.
Duffy's sloppy.
Grandmother left her with her love, a carefree life she had one day. The baby now is a lady, the one her mother couldn't stand. Way down in the British mountains, way down where the coffins grow, lives my sweetheart of the mountains. She's my little Georgia girl. We don't see no songs together. Smile at me. And she loves my sweetheart. Way down in the rich mountains. Way down. Is my sweetheart of the mountains. She's my little Georgia.
Live at the cellar door.
No, that's a tune that that we had arranged with a high lead
Yeah.
on top with a low tenor in the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever the Seldom Scene was working on a new song, John always wanted to try it with all three possible arrangements, with the lead on top or in the middle or in the bottom. So we did some in each arrangement.
Yeah.
He wanted to try it each way. And I often thought this is something that bands ought to do if they do a vocal workshop. They could illustrate how to do that and point out some of the famous trios in bluegrass history. Like, you know, the famous trio with the Stanley Brothers and Pee Wee Lambert with the high baritone part, and of course the famous Osborne brother
Sure.
trios where they put the lead on the top,
Yeah.
and then the conventional lead in the middle, which they did with so many, you know, prominent singers. There are hundreds of songs you could use to illustrate that. Now, some of the things that we did with Seldom Seen, we would trade position of the lead. Got the one that comes to mind, that old Hank Williams song, "A Picture from Life's Other Side."
Mm-hmm.
I think we went through it with a lead in the middle and wound up in a different key with a lead at the top. I think is what we did on that one. But it gave a change of dynamics in a song that is basically very simple. It's a way to add more interest.
Mm-hmm.
Something that is basically simple.
Yeah. Speaking of simple, this next, or John, let me just right quick bring this up. His grandfather's clock. I've heard that bass solo or people trying to play.
So many times.
I've heard it so many times. You've been extremely influential in that area.
I dread having to play that anymore because I always get it going too fast and I make a fool of myself. I get it going too fast.
Yeah.
But the whole purpose of it is to just play it a little faster each time you go through it. And on our recording of that, I did play 3 bass solos.
Yeah.
The middle one was a slap solo, and the third time through, I was just playing it just as fast as I could, and honestly, it got too sloppy. I'm not too proud of some of those things, but it was fun to do on stage, and people kept asking for it again.
Yeah. Well, I hate to not play it since you've been very associated with this tune. Do you mind listening to a little bit of it?
Wait a minute.
Do you mind if we play just a little bit?
Oh, hey, go ahead. Hey, that's fine. It starts off with Ben's banjo.
Yeah.
We're doing an instrumental which features the bass fiddle, and I know it is. If it wasn't, we wouldn't do it. Tom won the award this past year down at North Carolina for the best bass player in bluegrass music. And so he won't
never catch me doing that to Larry the Legend, I'll tell you.
Larry the Legend on the dobro was also voted the finest dobro player. The only award I got was from the state trooper. Anyway, back to this instrumental. We're going to show you why Tom's the best. It's called Grandfather's Timepiece.
Don't hit any bad notes now, Tom. Don't be nervous.
Could be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right.
I guess they'll just wear you out, you know.
There was the timepiece. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my friends, it's we've been on here for almost 2 hours.
Yeah.
I guess
Oh, more than that. Well,
that's
we have
right.
a lot to, we have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely, and we sure would love to have you back one of these days. You know,
Yeah.
more. You know, it's
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay, and I apologize for I can't always understand things. My hearing is going bad. In the music, my fingers are getting bad. Look, hey, look at these. I got these crooked joints. I got swollen joints that make make it hard for me to play a guitar or a mandolin anymore. But when I'm playing bass, it's only one note at a time, and I can handle that. Well, I can still play it. So,
always.
It's been an honor, Tom and Jerry. You know, it's an honor to meet y'all, and it's an honor to chat with y'all.
well,
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, it's been my
My pleasure.
It's good, especially Tom, to spend time with you again, and maybe we can do something like this again before too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And until then, you know, I hope we can stay in touch. I have more questions I'd like to ask Tom, but I'll text you or something. You know.
Okay.
So thanks for everybody for tuning in to this interesting show tonight, and thanks Tom and Doug and John for helping out. Good night, everybody.